Welcome back, everyone. I did want to say before we start today's teachings, I was kind of thinking about everyone's with all the amazing shares that happened yesterday. And I think what was very powerful about what you all said is that you were able to take the teachings and use them, toward your tendencies. And everyone has different tendencies. And I think sometimes you can read the stuff and it all sounds like there's only one way to take it. But I felt like everyone was able to say, this is how you would use it toward what I tend to do, that could be shifted. So I thought that was very powerful. And then also just wanted to highlight when Ange said um, that there's no correct behavior in a situation, and that these teachings are pointing us to sort of figuring out what to do rather than telling us what to do, which is true of all of the yogic Buddhist and Buddhist teachings. And it's sometimes feels like kind of a bummer, like it might be nice to have a formula, but it wouldn't work to have a formula. So we're left with being sort of taught how to look closely and use our own intelligence and insight and the wisdom that we keep gaining to work with our lives. So I had wanted to say that yesterday. And the other thing, so today's teaching is sort of perfect for where we've been, because everyone's already acknowledging that this is about our lives. And that's very powerful too, that you've already, I don't have to teach that, you already know that. But today's teaching, point 4, is make your life your path. So this means that practice isn't like a thing to check off on our to-do list every morning or every evening, but rather it's an attitude with which we approach everything. So we want to apply awareness and care throughout our day and throughout our life. And it honestly, as I think you've all realized or know, it wouldn't make sense to practice for 15 minutes a day and then go on total autopilot the rest of the day, when actually what we do and say and, really counts. So our life is where we apply the practice. And we need to generate the ability to apply this attitude ongoing. So that's part of what we're doing today as well. So here's the question: how do we help to cultivate this attitude throughout our lives? Point 17 addresses this. It says, practice the 5 strengths, the condensed heart instructions. And depending which of the major Tibetan lineages you've studied, like when I heard the 5 strengths, the 5 strengths I was trained in are not the 5 strengths from this lineage. So it's not the mindfulness starting out list and faith and energy. So this is a different list for those of you who have been trained Kaju. So the 5 strengths describe how to cultivate the spirit that we need to energize ourselves on the path. And this list, and the Buddhists love lists because it was an oral tradition. So it's a way to remember them. And luckily 5 isn't really too many. Sometimes when you get into these lists of 8 or 12, it's like impossible to remember for us, because we're not used to memorizing things because we just have it in our phone. The 5 strengths are strong determination, familiarization, seed of virtue, reproach, and aspiration. The third one was seed of virtue. So strong determination, familiarization, seed of virtue, reproach, and aspiration. So first we have strong determination. So the transformation of our attitude from blaming or shutting down into open-hearted communication and skill is going to take long-term steady effort. Without strong determination, we won't be able to keep this going. But very important through, I think, all of these practices and pretty much anything we want to do that's important in life, it's not about gritting our teeth and trying really, really hard. And I think that we've been trained to think like, if you want to do something and it's important, you just try as hard as you can. And that's why people, burn out so quickly when they try to do things in our culture, especially things that are going to actually take a long time. So, to sustain any long term effort, I would argue in pretty much anything, we need to try in a way that doesn't wear us out or get us disheartened if we don't see results immediately. So, we have to sort of figure that out. There's a great, I'm not going to remember it now. I don't remember who said it, some Black activist woman, um, whose name escapes me. But she said basically, don't succeed too quickly. Natalie Goldberg was quoting her, but and basically, like, if we just, all of a sudden see all of this change and we were like, yeah, just done it, probably that's not going to last, and it's not going to be really all that powerful. So, like, even just taking that off the table, the succeeding too quickly. I mean, if you happen to make strides early, great, but like, to not have that be the goal or the idea, or to sort of value that more than long-term steady change, because long-term steady change sticks, and it might be more powerful. There might be things you see along the way that if you just achieve things too quickly, you miss sort of even going the right place. So, getting in touch with our strong determination requires tapping into what truly matters to us. So, you may or may not agree with me on this, but this is just from my personal experience. I've always believed that every one of us has all of the willpower that we actually need. But we can only access it when we're really deeply motivated. Otherwise, we don't actually want the goal, and it seems like we can't muster the effort. And if you've ever had any kind of addiction to anything, however mild, um, it's, for me, like, if I'm motivated really, really strongly to give up the addiction, then it's not a problem. But if I'm not really motivated, I'm like, I should really kind of give up coffee, but I don't really care and I enjoy it. Then I'm not going to do it. And the problem isn't my willpower. It's the fact that I actually value the coffee more than giving up the coffee. Not that, that's just the first thing that came to my mind. The coffee is necessarily a problem, but I think we all have that, whether it's an anger problem or a greed problem or a substance or, giving up gluten or, whatever the thing is. It's about valuing the goal, and the willpower follows. So I think that we need to apply that here. So we need to realize how very and truly important the transformation that we're working on here is, that our happiness and the happiness of those around us hinges on it. And then that can motivate. That's the strong determination sort of motivator. So if we see the true value that these shifts in our hearts can bring, then we can relax into the effort with a sense of joy. And that's going to make this whole process a whole lot more pleasant. This and anything else, right? Anything that we're working on. And then we can trust that we're on the right path. We can engage with the practice with steady energy, fueled by the care that we have for ourselves and for others. So to me, that's the deepest motivation. But you're welcome to put your own in, right? So it's all too easy to get lost in the details of daily life and forget about our highest values. Strong determination is the commitment to stay connected intentionally to that which matters to us most. And we'll come back to that again with the fifth one, aspiration. And that could be a way of describing practice, actually, is, committing to that which matters to us most. And what I love about that, as a goal, is no one's telling you what matters most to you. You get to figure that out, and then ideally orient your life in that direction, and that brings meaning and happiness. The second strength is familiarization. Holly, did you have a question or comment? No. So the Tibetan word for meditation actually literally translates as familiarization. And it means that the practice is really about getting to know our inner landscape. It's a way of describing mindfulness practice that we want to become aware of how we are on a moment to moment basis so we can understand how we are interacting with our world. Pema Chodron writes the following about familiarization. She says, you begin to realize that all of the teachings are about yourself. You're here to study yourself. And I think this is true because, of course, what you learn about yourself is going to help you understand other people, help us understand other people. But the truth is, because everything we know about the world filters through us, because that's how we know things, getting to know us is going to teach us about the world. And, there's a lot of people out there who sort of study the world, but maybe haven't studied themselves. And I think they come up with questionable hypotheses sometimes or proofs of things, that when you think about the fact that your own point of view is playing into what you see in, a social science experiment, that's, what's your point of view and how does that color? That's the lens through which we see the world. So by exploring ourselves, it helps us figure out even where we're seeing the world clearly and where we're not, which is a big part of this particular teaching. So that was the first part of familiarization. But the second part of familiarization is like becoming familiar with the teachings, meaning here the 59 slogans. So they become second nature and they're available to you at any time. So with practice in a challenging moment, we might actually turn to compassion instead of anger or disconnection, right? We might remember the goodness of our own heart and offer mercy instead of punishment to ourselves and to others. We live in a culture that values punishing bad behavior, and I'm not saying that never has value, but starting to look to see like what does that actually create, and how does that encourage positive transformation or discourage positive transformation. This is stuff to look at in personal relationships, but also I think in society as a whole. So through familiarization, we create new habits to replace the old ones that weren't working. And of course, your habits at work, keep them. Great. This doesn't mean you have to throw everything out, just the ones that you decide aren't working. And Norman Fisher describes familiarization as brainwashing, which I love because it's kind of like it's conditioning, but it's also cleaning. So we cultivate new habits, and slowly over time, they actually become automatic and they become the new habits. And we can totally do that because they are conditioned. So this is fantastic news. This is how the whole Dharma works. So that's familiarization. Our third strength is seed of virtue. This refers to your innate goodness, yours and everybody else's. So it's like we all have seeds of kindness and compassion already built into us. They don't need to be added to our being. The practices are designed to water the seeds, to give them the right amount of light and nourishment so that they sprout and become visible above ground. And this is an important point in our culture because we tend to judge ourselves quite harshly. We may even think that something's wrong with us for having some bad habits or habits that aren't working. Bad isn't even necessarily the right word there. But from the point of view of these teachings, nothing is wrong with any of us. We just need to grow that which we already have seeds for. We all have the potential to display infinite kindness and compassion, even like annoying people. So remember that self-love was one of our 2 preliminary practices. So we can always return to that preliminary to strengthen our feeling of worthiness and integrity when we feel it's needed. Okay, the fourth strength is reproach. So, of course, right, I think goes without saying, this is not about criticizing ourselves. I don't know what a better word for approach. I wanted to keep the list, as it was, but so that's the word there. So we have to kind of talk about what reproach, how it's being used here. So it's more like learning about our bad habits and getting disillusioned by them, sort of seeing through them, seeing how they don't work. Um, we start to pay attention to the places in our lives where we sabotage our own happiness and our connection. And we see it doesn't have to be that way. And then maybe we think of reproaching the habits, not the person, if that works for you. So our reproach for the habits is seeing through them and feeling like we don't want them in our lives anymore. For example, getting angry used to feel so effective at getting me what I want, but now I see it just made other people fearful and unhappy, and I can reproach that particular coping method rather than engaging in it. Or blaming other people for my feelings used to make me feel so righteous, but now I see that the victim role prevented me from the well-being and empowerment that comes from owning my feelings. And I can reproach that particular method of coping with difficulty instead of buying into its false feeling of strength. So those are examples of reproaching. So the idea is not to blame how we've coped with difficulty up until now. So we learned it from our families and our culture. It's not personal, and that's, I think, a weird thing to say if you haven't thought about it this way, that the way I act isn't personal. But it's not, because I was taught it when I was by myself or other people when I was young enough to not have like the array of these are 10 different ways to be. Which one would you like? I think this one would suit you better. Like, it just doesn't work that way, right? So you're 3 years old, you figure out, given the way, this is going to get me what I want, you start doing it that way, or this is going to help me cope with challenging situations. We can be young and end up overwhelmed, or old and end up overwhelmed by a situation, right? And we need to do something. So we pick something and it either works or it doesn't. If it doesn't work, we try something else. If it works, that's our new habit. And then we kind of do it every time we get into a similar situation. That's not personal. That's trial and error, right? So if we can stop seeing it as personal and seeing it as just a habit, it's a lot easier to, forgive ourselves, soften, and actually change things. So if it helps, the next time you see yourself doing something you don't like, just, kind of have a chuckle, like, that's not me, that's just stuff, and for me, that helps. So we're growing up here. Hey, we're raising ourselves again. We're learning to decide for ourselves which of our habits are helpful and which ones are harmful. We don't need to reproach ourselves for the habits or reproach the people who trained us that way. Like, none of that is going to be helpful. They also had the same process, right? Of kind of having this stuff end up in their lap one way or the other. And I hope for them that they can figure out, at some point in their lives what we're doing now, but not everyone has the inclination or the resources or whatever. So it's not about blaming them. It sort of just goes infinitely back. We can simply look closely at what we're doing, become clear about what doesn't work, and retrain ourselves to see things in a more realistic and generous way. And I try to remember this for myself. We're more neuroplastic, meaning we can make changes in how we think and act and feel when we're in a positive mental state. So being harder on ourselves will make it harder to change. So try to lighten up, try to have a sense of humor, and be ready to and willing to forgive ourselves again and again and again. We're all worth it. And then the fifth strength is aspiration. So I think it's important that we ask ourselves, how would we like to be in the world? What would we like the world to look like? How might we achieve this step by step in our own lives using these teachings and any other sources of wisdom that you have access to? So, our aspirations are our motivation for practice, and they fuel our efforts on the path as we live our lives. So, it's our yearning for a skillful and meaningful life that gives us the drive to achieve it. And of course, sometimes we get stuck in survivor mode, and we just get through the day. Other times, we might get into automatic mode in our daily routine and forget altogether to consider the big picture. And other times, we might get bummed out about the world or our health or our relationships, and we stop enjoying the ride. So, aspiration is a reminder that we can orient our lives toward what we truly value, regardless of our circumstances or our challenges. And in fact, from the point of view of these teachings, we can use our difficulties or whatever we're currently facing to engage with the practice to improve our lives. So there's no time like the present, and there's nothing we have to wait for. So the fact that you're here, right, engaging with these teachings, means that you're interested in considering ways that you can change your perceptions, your attitude, and your understanding in order to more creatively engage with the world, in order to be happier and to make life better for other people, or you would be doing something else. So your aspiration got you here, and it will continue to guide you along the path. So the 5 strengths of determination, familiarization, seed of virtue, reproach, and aspiration are both guiding principles and motivators to help us make our actual lives our path and practice. Which brings us to point 18, practice for death as well as for life. So it turns out that how to live well is the same as how to die well. The same advice actually applies to both. And so point 18 encourages us to apply the 5 strengths to prepare for our deaths and our dying, as well as for living. And if you've not given much thought to death or dying and you want to, there is a workshop series. It was 3 weeks on my website. It's called An Invitation to Live. And I recommend, if you haven't done it, we'll talk about it right now a little bit, but it's a great way to sort of get more juice out of life, to sort of face the death thing and think about it, feel about it. So our culture does not really like talking about death, probably noticed, but if we deny it, it lurks as a kind of underlying stressor. So did you know that fear of death is the second greatest fear that we face, according to surveys, after public speaking, which is the first? Which is kind of funny. So it's better to look straight at it and consider how acknowledging death can help us live more fully and more meaningfully. So consider that nobody lives forever, and none of us know when we're going to die, actually. So this can be a strong motivator to shift our priorities. First of all, if we want to die well, we need to train ourselves to live well, as it's really the same qualities of character and wisdom that are going to get us through the process. Knowing that we could die at any time means there's no time to waste in beginning our practice. Second of all, we don't want to die with regrets. That would be a huge bummer, actually, I think. And I think it happens to, a significant percentage of people. So the question is, what can we work on now to clean up our inner emotional turmoil and our challenging relationships with other people? And what do we want to do in this life so that at the end of our lives, when we look back, we'll feel good about how we lived? And these are just personal questions to consider for ourselves. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, after being with 10,000 dying people and helping them to pass, said, "I never met a single person who deeply regretted not having spent another day at the office." And, okay, I'm looking at you guys and, I don't see people who, whatever, maybe value that, but it does, beg the question of what might you wish you had done more of? What will be important to you at that time? Which is a question about what's important to you now. And then third, other people are going to die. I know you know this, but it's important to acknowledge consciously. So in this light, maybe small slights or disagreements pale compared to the love that's there. So often, when someone's on their deathbed, folks are able to reconcile who'd been estranged for many years. It happens all the time. So the question is, do we want to wait until then? Or should we get the benefits now? So the question is there someone you need to forgive? Is there someone that you need to tell them that you love them? So point 4 encourages us to make our life our path instead of thinking that our path is just one kind of separate element of our life. Life and death are the task at hand, and living well is the ultimate reward. And there's no time like the present to begin to open and awaken our hearts. Any thoughts, comments, questions about point 4 or anything else up till now? Let's do some practice. So today we're going to move. We've already been doing elements of this, but we're going to move from just the focus on self-compassion, and we're going to work with compassion for someone we care about. Debbie, we can all be a little jealous of your biomat. Awesome. So we'll begin with the body. Feeling the sit bones drop down into your chair or your cushion or the floor. Allowing the spine to gently lift tall in a sustainable way, energizing. And softening the crown of the head and the scalp. the face, the shoulders, and the belly. And as we relax the belly, we free up the breathing to settle into a natural rhythm, however the body chooses. And we can use the sensations of breathing in the body as a way to gently gather our attention, orient ourselves here in the body, cultivating a sense of spacious presence, of calm clarity. And allowing the effort to be joyful, relaxed. So not, putting pressure on ourselves to be a certain way, not judging what's here. Simply being interested in our own being, curious, open-minded, wanting to learn, become familiar, to know. Valuing this being, it's worth being interested in, just, orienting in that way. So that this practice, simple mindfulness, can be an act of self-love. And now I'd like you to bring to mind a person who's been kind to you. On your natural exhale, send them love, gratitude, and appreciation. Exhaling from the center of the chest, may they find the deepest satisfaction and joy in their life. May their most heartfelt wishes be fulfilled. May they be well and truly happy. And now we'll begin to add bearing witness to their challenges. So on the natural inhale, feel that you're inhaling their challenges in life. Take your time and open as slowly as you need to their difficulty. Attending in particular to the emotions that they may be feeling. I think of it as like being a good listener for this person. So exhale, may you be free from suffering. Inhale their pain and exhale the sentiment that you feel their pain and you meet it with compassion. Imagine you can inhale what they might need to express. And you exhale back that you hear them, that you're here for them. Allow their difficulty, their challenges to open your heart and cultivate your compassion. Keep the breathing natural and relaxed. And with this practice, we might even be able to stay relaxed in our breathing on the spot in life when we see those we love having a painful experience. This is a fantastic training. If someone else comes to mind, you're welcome to switch to a different person if you want to, a different person that you love. Inhale their difficulty and exhale your presence and warmth to them. feel that compassion is bittersweet. So, although we're engaging with the difficult emotions of someone we love, we're also connecting with them. And this can create an underlying feeling of joy. Intuit and know that acknowledging someone's challenges is a meaningful experience for both people. This practice may allow us to be more skillful with this person in the future, to be able to be there with them in their pain instead of avoiding them or trying to fix the situation. So we practice simply being with the pain of another and wishing them well. Now consider all of the folks around the world who experience similar difficulties to this person. Inhale their challenges, their difficult emotions. Exhale your care, your concern, your warmth, and connection. And now go back and forth between practicing for the person you care about and practicing for all folks with similar issues, switching from one to the other when you decide, when you feel ready. And now we'll release the practice and return to the simple experience of the rise and fall of the breath in the body. So, any comments, thoughts, questions, anything?
All right, I have a few. So just practice wise, that was really wild. Um, when I was experiencing just the love for the other person, very easy, very bright, very easy for me today, right? Then when we started to switch, it was not easy at all. And I started to not be able to breathe on that inhale. So I did something kind of weird. I sort of envisioned myself like a satellite dish and big, like I was big. So I was breathing, but I wasn't here. It was like the heart was kind of the center of the dish. But when I was breathing, it was still here, but it was bigger. And then that allowed way more space than to like pull it right there. Did not work. So once I kind of played with it, that was better, much better. And then I also had to change the phrasing for the offering to make it more like to get that felt sense of it kind of a little more kind of gradually, and it was okay. It wasn't there at first, no problem. But I was like, oh, I think just a little tweak here or there to get there. Yeah, but I was really surprised at that tightening, tightening. And then other people came to mind, and it was actually easier out to the world than to that one human that I chose, who I very much love. And I think just feeling, and, in my everyday life with this person, I have a really hard time when he's not feeling well. I get mean, you guys. I'm kind of like, chop, chop. We need to fix you, instead of being loving and supportive I go back and forth, but he's the one person that I know of a lot that's really, so this, I love this. This is going to be very helpful for both of us. He's sending you gratitude as well right now, Karen, whether he knows it or not. I hope that made sense. Thanks, guys.
Yeah. So everyone should feel free to adjust the phrases, right? Because it's hard to pick the right words. Once you know the felt sense, if you're going to use phrases that embody what are doing. And that's always fine. And just, knowing that it is hard to watch someone we love deal with difficulty. And it's so easy to want to fix them, change them. And it's not that we don't care, that's just an easier place to be. So I think that this is true for all of us all the time, and to be able to acknowledge um, just how hard that is, and that we can practice with it. Um, bringing up something hard. And it's kind of interesting, because when I first learned compassion practice in the Tibetan, we had to it was my grandma I had picked, and then I had to imagine her in molten metal boiling, and I was like, this is just not first of all, I couldn't do it, and I refused to do it. In the time, I didn't really understand why I was doing it. But like, picturing something that's real, and opening our hearts to that, that's the motivation is there. We can see why. If we can tolerate that, we might be more nice on the spot instead of trying to fix them, um, you know, out of our own discomfort with their pain. And I loved what Ange talked about with the breathing too. I mean, because really, if we can figure out a way to breathe through challenging stuff through life, it's going to make us more calm and less anxious, and more able to deal with it. So whatever, I love that she went through her own thing that worked for her. And um, notice as you go through challenging stuff, like, notice what your breath is like. Notice if you're holding tension in your body. What an amazing thing in the moment, first of all, to, instead of freaking out, be in your body, noticing your breath. Like, that alone can stop a reaction for at least, a little bit. And then to, like, use all of the, we've all practiced enough yoga, but to use those skills in the moment to, be as present and relaxed as we can. So thank you, Ange. So helpful. Anyone else?
All right, then I have a little more to say if you guys are okay. Um, Going back to just what the five were, I love them. Those are not the ones I learned. These are a little more helpful and useful, actually, and are more resemble my own experience as I've been working through things. I would say this has been the primary focus of my practice for the past many years. I didn't realize it until I read it, but this is really what I've worked on and what I've supported other people to work with. And that it's, the five are such an interwoven, intermeshed thing. It's not this one, then this one. And it's like this constant play back and forth between working with these. And then my experience with that, I made a note on that. The first one, the strong determination. I've been down on myself at times because it was like, I can't seem to get through this habit. I can't seem to change it. I think I've got willpower. I have this really strong intention for why I want to change it, but it's not shifting. So I really liked the thing you said at the end, Karen. It was really about stay connected intentionally to what matters most. Because for me, it's like there's got to be some softening around, okay, for whatever reason, that one's still here. That pattern is still there. it's not shifting super easy, but I'm connected to this intention of really wanting the best for myself and others. And it really does matter. And what I've found over the years, and I'm still finding, is like these sometimes there's something that I'm not seeing that's right there, or something that's emotionally so deep or charged or linked to it, like neurologically, like linked to this thing, that until that aspect is able to be seen, to be held, to be with, and that could take a year or two or lifetime. Um, it's not going to switch much. Yeah, but just like it really is helpful to have a little bit of like places to put these. I've been using different terms for some of this from a different training system, but these speak to my heart so much. And um, there's one more thing I highlighted. Oh, and just that the habits aren't personal, yet we have the opportunity to switch them, which is our power and gift and stuff. And I have to remember that one for myself over and over and over. Um, because it's easy to just really, they feel personal because it's a felt sense in the body, and the mind is doing what the mind's doing. And those are happening in this little form. And yet they're not. So that's all helpful. Thanks, guys.
Um, to what Ange said, this has been my personal experience too, is like you kind of like, all right, I want this thing to change and I want it to be different now. Um, but really there's a long, especially like these sort of core wounds, like the kind of deepest things that we're working on, they have to unfold in their own time, and they have parts, right? So one part unfolds, and then this other part of, like, it's like a knot untangling. Like the whole thing doesn't just untangle at once. There's elements. I mean, little things do, but like the big things, um, it's got a natural progression. And all we can do is sort of have this strong determination, know what direction we're going, and kind of keep going through the different parts of the process. And that's the only way it works, but we want to trust that it works because other people have done this. First of all, you have confidence in smaller things that you've worked on, and also other people are saying this has worked for them. And those of you who have heard all my stories know that my relationship with my mom has been this sort of unfolding um, process. And I feel like every year some element of it sort of like evaporates. Something that felt really solid just drops away. But there's a lot of those things. I'm not sure I felt that way in the beginning, but I would say the last few years, like something drops away and I'm like, whoo, that's gone. Um, and I don't know if I'll ever be done, but so what? And then the other thing to keep in mind is that in the beginning, maybe that's not happening and you're not seeing these major elements sort of shift. And I always think of Rebecca Solnit's book, Hope in the Dark. And she talks about social change, and every movement of social change has started with like nothing happening and people doing a lot of work, and then it's not until everything reaches a kind of critical mass that actually you see things changing. But then you can look back at the history and see like the first step was taken 100 years before. So you can think about it as a seed, right? You plant a seed, it's underground, you're watering and you're doing, the lights right and whatever, but it's germinating underground. You don't see it until it pokes up through the dirt, and that happens in the right time as nature decides. So I try to remember that too, like that all this, stuff's happening in the dark until I get to see it somewhere down the road. All right, your two quotes for today. First, from Kobanchino Roshi. He says, the more you sense the rareness and value of your own life, the more you realize that how you use it, how you manifest it, is all your responsibility. We face such a big task, so naturally, we sit down for a while. And then a quote from Viktor Frankl: "We who lived in concentration camps can remember the men who walked through the huts, comforting others, giving away their last piece of bread. They may have been few in number, but they offer sufficient proof that everything can be taken from a man but one thing, the last of the human freedoms: to choose one attitude in any given set of circumstances, to choose one's own way." I got through that without crying too, so that's good. Why that one gets me. Thank you so much. We'll see you tomorrow.